minimize the L.A. findings, and then we learn they relied on them as well. Last, the former case that his accuser and his family gave, in their own words, an initial denial that Michael Jackson did anything wrong. In interviews conducted months apart, but both after the alleged abuse had at least begun, the accuser and his family paint completely different portraits of Michael Jackson at different times. One, a father figure and savior of cancer-stricken child. The other, a manipulative sexual predator of children. Plus, we learned Santa Barbara did its own investigation that was closed without any charges filed against Jackson. What happened to the DA poo-pooing the work of the Los Angeles Child Services? Now remember, we obtained an exclusive audio tape of what led up to that Child Services interview.
This is between our department and you and your children. No, it's not. That's what I'm saying. And that's exactly why we're trying to do this as discreetly as possible. All the cases are sealed. No one has any records or anything. I know that, 2 years ago, when other allegations came out regarding Michael Jackson, things got in the news, what have you. That's the reason that our unit was developed.
Well, it's not that secret, I guess. Prophetic words from the mother. Let's bring in our legal team now. Former Santa Barbara County Sheriff and MSNBC analyst Jim Thomas. Criminal defense attorney John Burris. Former San Diego District Attorney and MSNBC analyst Paul. Thanks to NBC's Mike Tybee. He's back with us. All right, Sheriff Thomas, I don't understand how the Santa Barbara authorities can defend having gone public and said, oh, those L.A. people, they have problems over there. As it turns out, they did their own investigation, and they came to the same conclusion as the people in Los Angeles.
No, Dan, if you remember, even Mike said that the Sheriff's Department did not interview the mother or the children back in the early part of the investigation. That was not done until June after the appointment with Dr. Katz.
Right, but they still conducted an investigation, Sheriff. I mean, they still opened the case and closed it.
They opened the case, but at that point, you had no victim. The child had not confided in anyone until June. So the mother didn't know, the siblings didn't know, and the case was started only because of suspicions based upon the Bashir's document. Nobody had ever come forward at that point and specifically said that Michael Jackson had molested that child. Certainly that child did not say that and did not say that until June. So in essence, you really had no victim until June.
Don't you think, though, it is misleading of Tom Sneddon, who I know is a good friend of yours, to have gone out publicly and said, oh, that L.A. thing, that wasn't an investigation, it was just an interview. It turns out they relied on that interview, the Sheriff's Department in Santa Barbara relied on that very interview to conduct their own investigation and say, we looked at it, case closed.
Yeah, because there was no victim. There was no allegation other than the suspicions of the people who were concerned about the Bashir's document. I'm not going to defend what Tom Sneddon said. He can do that himself. But the concern I think he had also with DCFS had to do with leaking of documents and some other matters as well as the conclusion.
Paul Finks, do you view this as not, let's not say irrelevant, but as not as big a deal the same way Sheriff Thomas does?
Yeah, pretty much, Dan. When you do interagency work in law enforcement, it's pretty common for one agency to rely upon statements by another agency. At the time that L.A. did its interviews of the boy and the family, once they said, listen, no sexual abuse took place and he's a good guy, there was no case because there was no victim. What is really critically important, and what this case will probably depend upon, Dan, is why did they change from denial to accusation?
And the whole family changes, Paul. It's not just one or two people. It's the sister, the brother, the mother, the whole team.
You're absolutely right. And that is the crux of this case. If there is not a good explanation for that, then Michael Jackson will be acquitted. Well, if there is a sound, reasonable explanation for that, then he stands a good chance of being convicted. But what is going to be the linchpin of the case?
What is the sound explanation? I understand the possibility that one person, that the boy might have felt intimidated, that the mother might not have wanted to go public with this. But this means someone would have had to have told the sister to lie, right?
Yeah.
Initially.
Yeah, Dale, in domestic violence cases and child sexual abuse cases, this is not an uncommon scenario. This happens regularly. And it's one of the problems that prosecutors have to deal with in both domestic violence and child sexual abuse. It's a common problem.
John Burris, what do you make of it?
Well, it's certainly a problem, no matter how you slice it, no matter when it started. The fact that different statements were given early, a whole family, almost, and then they changed. The question is, were they motivated by money? Did someone else put these ideas in their head? And why did this happen? I don't think you can come up with a reasonable explanation that cannot be exploited by the defense to demonstrate that they're prior and consistent statements. So it's a real problem for the defense. It's not anything more we already knew. The question of whether the motivation on the part of the prosecution has been bandied about, I don't see that as much of a problem because at the end of the day, they're not on trial. It's ultimately the question of what did the witnesses have to say on each of these different occasions, and what is their motivation, and if there are other lawyers involved, and there's issues about money, possibility being as a motive, and other reasons there, I think that's going to hurt the prosecution case substantially, and they may not recover from it.
You know, Mike, I know you don't want to characterize too much, but let me ask you this. Were you surprised to hear that there was a Santa Barbara investigation? Because I was.
Very much so. In fact, at first, that's what I thought our story was going to be. When I first heard last week about the existence of this investigation, and then was able to confirm it with someone, frankly, who works for Santa Barbara County, confirmed it independently, and then thought that was going to be the story. Then we had a chance to look at the records, Matt Carluccio and I, when we saw the records, we saw that for the first time we could tell the detailed stories, the contrasting stories told by the accuser and his family, and that became even a bigger story at that point. Yes, I was surprised because of the ferocity, if you will, that with which Mr. Stedman had made his comments about Los Angeles' investigation.
Sheriff Thomas, were you surprised to hear that Santa Barbara had done its own investigation?
No, not really. I wasn't aware of the specifics of the report, but I wasn't surprised at all because the jurisdiction was in Santa Barbara, and that would have been common for the court. But I don't see why everybody has a problem understanding the fact that the reason that the mother would not tell the same story is because she didn't know that the child had been molested until June.
But see, here's the problem, Sheriff.
That what she said, she would have said it was true.
But Sheriff, it's not
been what she believed at the time.
All right, I apologize. It's not just about the molestation, though. It's that the sister is saying suddenly that they were giving liquor, that Michael Jackson's getting them drunk. The mother's changing the story about whether they were in bed at all ever together. I mean, these are not just sort of was he abused or not. All the details are changing, too.
You know, I have the trouble that I have here with Santa Barbara is that the deputy DA, the DA has basically made these negative statements about L.A. Children and Family Services.
Yeah.
Why would he accept their report?
That's what I don't
Given that he has, in fact, investigated Michael Jackson before, he has reservations about him, why would he even remotely
I got to give the sheriff the final word on this.
Well, you have to have a victim, and the victim wasn't there until June and when he had the interview with Dr. Katz. And so up to that point, it was speculation and concern.
I don't think he has more than that because he already has these assertions. He could go out himself and have someone go out and interview these people himself.
We shall see. And again, you know, if the Santa Barbara County authorities, through the PR firm they're working with, want to give us any sort of statement with regard to this, we welcome it, and I assure you we'll put it on the air.